evening and welcome to the Paranormal Zone. We have a guest on tonight who is truly one of the icons of New England's paranormal community. This individual is the most dedicated mystery historians of modern times. We'd like to welcome Roxie Zwicker, also known as the Mystery Maven. Welcome, Roxie.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Welcome, Roxie. Yes, it is. It's nice to have you on this new show that Bob and I got going on. It's a fun show, and it's all about you.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roxie, one of the questions I want to start with is, because our listeners are always interested in how we got involved with, mystery tours and paranormal, ghost hunts, and so forth. How did you get started in all of the events and everything you do now?
So about 30 years ago, when I was living in Massachusetts, I actually took a part-time job telling the local legends and lore on a wagon ride through the cranberry bogs of Carver, Massachusetts. And I worked there for quite some time. It was a lot of fun. It was a great second job. It was just seasonal, but got to hear a lot of good stories and meet a lot of people that had stories. So, now fast forward to about 23 years ago, moving up here to the seacoast, I got involved as a volunteer on the board of directors for Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse. Just because it's so historic and beautiful, I had no idea that I would be revisiting any sort of history or folklore about the lighthouse until I started spending time there and talking to the Coast Guard. And just for fun, I sort of called back on what I had done doing the haunted hay rides. And I figured, maybe a haunted walk would help raise some money for the lighthouse. And once again, it's another great historic community where people love to share their tales. So within that time, I actually started to develop a bunch of different tours and ended up slowly over the years rolling them all out. And of course, we raised a lot of money for the lighthouse and everything that it needed. But everybody seemed to have a story, from places that they've lived to a story their grandma told them. And they were more than happy to share those stories and to let me share those stories. So I'm always very grateful for the people I've met along the way.
It's funny that you mentioned the lighthouse, because I also had experience with them. Many years ago, I volunteered for 2 or 3 years there. And one time, they decided to do ghost tours. It was during the day, and we were up in the light, the actual light itself. And we were just chatting and going through kind of paranormal 101 things, that kind of stuff, telling some stories about the lighthouse. And all of a sudden, Roxie, the light came on. I mean, and up in that tower, you're very close to the light. So when it comes on, it's like, wow, what is that? It was on for a few seconds, and then it went out again. And I said, just casually, if you lit that light for us, would you light it again? Well, about 2 minutes later, the light lit up again. And as you know, the Coast Guard monitors that lighthouse, because that's actually a Coast Guard station. And we went to them afterwards and said, how does this happen? And they couldn't answer the question. They said, just have no idea why that light would have lit twice in that day. So there's no doubt that light has spirits in it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, again, because, like you said, the Coast Guard are very aware, and a lot of things happen at night when the park is closed and there's nobody around but Coast Guard personnel, which makes it even more intriguing, because I really don't think that they would have any reason to share stories of strange things going on, from mysterious footprints appearing on the helicopter pad to people being seen on the seawall around the lighthouse, let alone stories of keepers past that are there. And I've been up in the landing room many, many times over the years. And, when that light goes on, it's unmistakable. It's a huge lens that's in there. It's incredibly historic. It's from the 19th century. And, that is the way one of the lighthouse keepers' wives said that the lighthouses used to communicate with one another in the evening. When they would look up the coast, they would see all the lighthouses turning on. And it was a way for a keeper to say hello to one another. So that story that you're talking about with the light going on, to me, that's just a keeper of old saying hello.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's pretty cool. That really is great. Tell me, awesome. Roxie, you have so many workshops. Tom and I were talking earlier about, I don't know how you stay up with them all, frankly. I think what you do is just marvelous for people. Tell me what your favorite workshop is.
I love to teach people to use their intuition on a lot of different levels, to use their intuition for spirit communication, for dream work, for even just understanding signs and symbols throughout the day, understanding what their language of spirit is. Because, and I'm sure you all have the same experiences with people where they have an experience and they don't really know what it is or what it means. So I find that if you fine tune your intuition to understand your language of spirit and to understand what those signs mean, I think that really opens up the door for so many things. So I really like to teach people how to learn to better listen to their intuition and to understand what some of the messages are that are coming through. And it's amazing to really watch people open up and start checking all the boxes from things that they thought were a coincidence or really messages either from the other side or from loved ones or even from their higher self. So I think, being our best intuitive beings is one of the most amazing things that we can do.
And tell our listeners how they can look into your workshops if they want to get a hold of you.
Sure. So you can go to my website, which is newenglandcuriosities.com, and you'll find that there's an overabundance of information on there in regards to workshops, and workshops are both in person and online on Zoom. So it doesn't matter where you are in this wide world of ours. You can learn more right from your seat at home. And you can, also find me on, any social media via New England Curiosities, which is my company.
Roxie, you and Bob's favorite place happened to be the lighthouse. My favorite place on the seacoast is actually the Fort McCleary. So I don't know if you've heard stories about that one, but I'm going to tell you and the listeners across the world one quick one. So one day when my buddy got out of the hospital after suffering a bad heart attack, he was feeling better. He wanted to go for a ride up the coast, and we stopped at Fort McCleary. Now, you've been to Fort McCleary, I'm assuming. You've taken tours through there, right?
Many times. Fort McCleary is located in Kittery Point,
yes.
Right at the mouth of Piscataqua.
Correct. And we were downstairs, and you could hear someone walking upstairs. And as you know, it's a circle, only one stairwell. So I went up the stairs one way, he went up the other way, and we met in the middle, and there was nobody there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. There's another fort right across from that. Is that Fort McHenry?
Foster. No, that's Foster, I believe.
Yeah. There were two British forts, right? One where the lighthouse is, and then one right across the way, Roxie. Weren't they there to protect that harbor?
Right. So the original fort that was built in the 1630s, that was built on Newcastle Island, was Fort William and Mary, which today we know as Fort Constitution, where Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse is. When that lighthouse, the original one that was built there, was in 1771, but directly across on the other side of the river was the blockhouse at Fort McCleary. So it gave the defenses both sides of the river should anybody want to come into the port of Portsmouth. And then years later, we had Fort Foster that sprung up out at Kittery Point, which used to have all of these amazing Victorian hotels back in the day. And oddly enough, I've got ghost stories from all three forts.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting.
It really is quite an area down in that Portsmouth area for people that are interested in this. It just has so much mystery to it, the whole area. Roxie and I, Tom, actually did an event at the cemetery across from, what's the name of that place down there? Strawberry Bank.
Okay.
Yeah, remember that night, Roxie? We had a pretty good sized crowd. I think we had about 40 or 50 people that you did that tour.
I do. Yep, I totally remember that night.
Yeah, that cemetery is quite a place to be at night.
It's unexpected, too, because it's such a small cemetery, really, in a neighborhood.
Right. Yeah, it is tiny when you think about it. Roxie, what is your favorite folklore or historical tale that you reflect on?
God, it's such an intriguing question because there are so many amazing stories, and like you said, Bob, the Seacoast is just so rich in layers and so many different types of tales. I find that I tend to lean into a lot of the stories that a lot of people don't know about, and ones that have sort of lingered on. I mean, I love the stories from the Isles of Shoals and the Oceanic Hotel out there. I've been, very, very lucky to have been able to go out and stay over on Star Island, doing a couple of events out there. I think one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite haunted places is because it's really, you're away, first of all, and you're looking back across the water at New Hampshire. From the islands, it's just amazing. New Hampshire and Maine and Massachusetts, just to see them from that vantage point. But you're in a hotel that there's no TVs, there's no phones. It looks just like it did back in the 1800s. So your senses are already heightened out there. So you've got the hotel that has its own ghost stories. You've got the upper floor of the hotel that's known as Ghost Alley because they hear calliope music coming from that area, and there's calliope is, this is hundreds of years ago they were playing calliopes, 150 years ago. So they hear that music up there. There's footsteps, there's ghostly sightings. You've got, a haunted burial ground out there, the BB cemetery for the BB children that died. They were a minister's child, was going to school on the mainland, got sick, came back and got the other two siblings ill, and he buried all three of them on the island. Let alone, neighboring, you've got Smutty Nose Island, the infamous double axe murder with Louis Wagner. So there's definitely something amazing that is in the air out on Star Island. And I find that when I talk to people, they're like, oh, I've always meant to go out there. I'm always trying to give them the nudge because it's such an unforgettable experience. The stories of piracy, and the lighthouse out there is haunted. There's Betty Moody's cave where you hear children screaming. There's just such a plethora of stories that I love, and I love to be there. So that's right at the top of my list for sure.
So Roxie, a couple months back, I was asked to deliver a talk, so I put it together. And I don't have my notes with me from that talk, but it was on New England lake monsters and sea creatures. Now, up and down the coast, there's been sightings of champ-like sea creatures from Maine to Portsmouth to Gloucester. Have you ever done anything with that?
Yeah, there's supposed to be the sea serpent that's seen just off of 10-Pound Island in Gloucester. There's the Casco Bay sea serpent. There was also the sea serpent of Wells, which was interesting because there were many people as 1940s to 1960s who claimed to have seen the sea serpent of Wells. And then there was a school teacher in the late 1960s who said they had actually managed to get a piece of this sea serpent. And he had it, in this jar with formaldehyde and all of that. And come to find out in the end, it was like this really strange piece of a fish. It wasn't really a sea serpent type thing. And it's fascinating because even, I mean, if you go down to, Cape Cod and the islands, there's stories of sea serpents in Provincetown and also Martha's Vineyard. And I'm always amazed because, I look at some of the fish that are out there and I'm wondering, is it a fish? Is it a sea serpent? Your eyes can definitely play tricks on you, but it's the coast, so you're definitely going to find, all these tales of sea serpents out there. Definitely intriguing.
It definitely is, because there's a lot of things with these sea serpents and lake monsters. The stories of underground caves that connect the lakes of New Hampshire to the Portsmouth Harbor and Castine and Maine and all that area. So it's quite interesting when you look into that stuff.
It is, and I think when I look at some of the sturgeon fish,
yes,
some of the prehistoric fish, they look like they've been around for millennia, and some of them get pretty big. So I'm always wondering, is it in its own way? Is it a fish or is there something more? But you are right, there are these underground waterways where things connect that can get through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've always found the seacoast interesting. One of my favorite stories is actually Bob Roscoe, the dog, the spirit of the dog. You know that
the
story?
The spirit of the dog.
Yeah. You know that one, right, Roxie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones.
There's another story that about Blackbeard the pirate. Was alleged to have spent time in the Portsmouth, Maine, New Hampshire waters, and that he used to bring a lot of his treasure up from the Caribbean, and that he actually married a girl from New Hampshire and left her on that island with a couple of guards to watch the treasure. Well, the long and short of it is Blackbeard was captured and beheaded, and of course, never returned, right? But they now say that a lot of tour boats have seen this image standing out on the rocks, looking for him to return, and that's the ghost of his girlfriend or wife that was supposed to watch his treasure.
Right. It's an intriguing story, and even during the blizzard of 1978, the Coast Guard were out on White Island. There was a gentleman who had said that it was just such a fearful experience of him being out there during the storm and wondering if he was going to survive. And he said that he started to pray out loud, and this mysterious woman appeared before him and reassured him that everything was going to be okay. And, while there was a lot of damage to the island, he survived. And he always attributed it to this ghostly woman that was out there. And her story has really intrigued many for years. And again, that's another reason why the Isles and Shoals are just so incredibly fascinating, because for many years, even, before they really started recording history, and, the islands were discovered by Captain John Smith officially and all of that, they know that the islands were used as a cache for pirates. And of course, like you said, one of the most infamous of them being Blackbeard. And of course, there's, all of those fantastic connotations. And there was, if you continue to travel, up the Hampshire and southern Maine coast, you're going to find a lot of amazing stories of piracy up there. I mean, Black Sam Bellamy was, before the widow went down, he was intent on picking up his woman in Wellfleet, and she was known as the Witch of Wellfleet. And unfortunately, as we all know, the widow went down, but he was going to pick her up, and they were actually going up to Cape Elizabeth. So again, Cape Elizabeth not far from where we are on the Hampshire seacoast. No. So there, I mean, you could for years tell stories of piracy and their ghosts on the coast.
Right. Talking about witches, if you don't mind shifting gears a little bit, Tom and I have been trying to get the witches to come on for months now, right, Tom?
Yes.
because I think, Roxy, the witches have a tremendous story to tell. And yet, it's very difficult to get them to talk about it.
Well, first of all, it's a touchy subject for a lot of people because there is, a lot of misconceptions about it. Second of all, and I can, say for myself, I see a lot of people that come out to my tours and events, and they will tell you, straight up that they have connections to someone on either side of the witchcraft trials. So, we have, such a genealogy here in New England, and there still is, again, even though it's, I guess more accepted than it has been in the past, I think there is still that stigma of, being misunderstood and, even in some ways, I think, some people that I've talked to over the years feel like it's almost like a carnival sideshow act that gets paraded out in front of people, and people just want to sort of see and imagine what it's all about, versus then understanding that it's a form of religion for people. So it's a subject that has to be approached with care. However, I mean, we are seeing that there are some positive changes coming to those stories from history. I mean, one of my other favorite stories is that of Goody Cole, who was trying to invent witchcraft in 1656. And it wasn't until really not even 10 years ago that her grave was properly marked on Hampton Town Common. For years previous, from, the 1960s on, there was just this weird misshapen rock on her grave. And her ghost story has been told, since the 1920s. So, but it wasn't until Hampton's 375th anniversary that, and actually it was a friend of mine who had raised money for a plaque to be placed there talking about the witchcraft accusations and, and her passage. And all the information is there at the Tuck Museum, which I always invite people to go and check out. But isn't that, it just makes you stop and wonder, she passed in the 1690s, so it took over 300 years for her grave to be properly marked. So you can sort of see why, there is that stigma around it.
Yeah, no, I do get that. When I was with that other station, I had two witches come on. And of course, radio and like podcasts today, you can come on anonymously, so you don't have to give names and so forth. But they came on. It was one of the highest rated shows we had, frankly, the most listened to. Because I think, Roxy, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that, thank God, the days of huge discrimination against paranormal investigators, UFO researchers, witches, mediums, psychics, the whole nine yards, I hope is dwindled down to almost nothing. I know that we all deal with some of it every so often, but I just think if the witches came on a podcast or a radio show or whatever and told their story, that would help change the perception people have of them. Because they have an unbelievable story, and you are right on when you say it's religious.
Right, and I think, like you said, it is getting, getting to be a better climate out there for, all of these, all these different groups, whether it's paranormal investigators, like you said, or, people that practice witchcraft. I think it's just, it's hard to know, even if you're anonymous, it can be really, really frustrating for people. And I think one of, the wonderful things that, I get to experience is when people come out, whether it's a tour or a talk, that they're automatically, they're comfortable in talking about whatever experience, whatever history they have. And I think, having a podcast platform and just, talking about it the way that you are right now is welcoming and gives people an opportunity to understand that, hey, you're not having me on, in the wrong light. Because, again, I think there is that, even if you're anonymous, there is that fear of being called out for that. So, I definitely would, continue to pursue that and keep that conversation going, Bob.
Yeah, no, that's why Tom and I wanted to start this podcast, to give a voice to the entire paranormal community, to be able to come on in a friendly, non-threatening environment to tell their stories. And Roxie, my attitude, as with Tom, we talked about this a lot. We both agree, come on anonymously. You don't even have to tell us what state you're calling for. But I do believe that if the people in the paranormal community come on to podcasts like ours, and there's many, many out there that are very good, or radio stations and so forth, you're getting the word out and getting people educated to exactly what we do and why we do it. If we look at...
Absolutely, 100% agree with you.
Yeah, if you look at UFO folks, up until about 10 years ago, they were laughed at. Well, today, almost everything that people said over the last 30 years about UFOs is starting to come true. But they never had a voice before.
Well, it's amazing. Again, there's so many different ways to connect now than ever before. I mean, back in the day, not to make us all sound older than we are, but, back in the day, this was, these were conversations we'd be having, in person at a conference. You wouldn't be talking about this,
right.
On a podcast or, on the internet, so to speak. It was still very much, people would have to come out for that. And you can see, talking about UFO stuff, I mean, hats off to the beautiful historic town of Exeter, New Hampshire, and all that they do for their UFO festival, drawing people over
right.
there. So,
yes.
Again, they're providing a platform just like you guys are.
Yeah, Exeter does a great job with that UFO festival. It's breathtaking just to go.
Yeah, they actually do a great job with that. And now that people feel comfortable talking about their experiences with UFOs, more and more truths are coming out because of it. And that's what we need to do, is to be able to stand up and be heard, so that governments and large corporations and organizations have to take action.
Well, and it's the same thing, because I see it, whether you want to call it, the paranormal or folklore, history, or all of that. All of this stuff, whether it's, witchcraft or UFOs or, ghosts and the paranormal, right. It crosses, demographics, it crosses backgrounds, it crosses religions. So we actually all have much more in common with each other than we realize. I mean, just because, I'm in the field, I can say that because I see people all the time. So we actually, again, if people only knew, how many people are connected, by seeing UFOs or having ghost experience or, practicing an earth-based lifestyle and religion, like there's all that commonality that's in there that, we actually have a lot to talk about.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I really got into this field of paranormal investigation 20 years ago. And really, Roxie, I get into it because the first few cases I had, I felt so bad for the folks, both male and female, that I talked to, that was so afraid to tell anybody what they were going through, that they just didn't have anyone to turn to, in some cases even their families.
Yes.
And I started doing this because these people were searching for help, but afraid to ask for it.
That's so true, Bob. I've talked to people and they're like, I can't even tell my partner what I experienced. And, I'm sure with you guys too, how many stories have you heard that's prefaced with, hey, I'm not crazy, but, I've got to tell somebody, will you listen to me?
Right.
Right.
Is there some sort of closure or some sort of healing? Like, there's so much that comes with this, on the other side of that. There's that comfort in, and you don't even expect it half the time. Just the fact that somebody's able to tell you a story and you can, listen to them without judgment, there's a comfort in that.
That is correct. My saddest
Absolutely.
story I hear is we get a phone call, pick it up. We got A, B, C, D, E, F, all this going on in the apartment. Okay, am I crazy? No. Could be this. Well, let me check with my partner first, or my wife first, or my husband first, and we'll get back to you. Do you know how many of those don't get back to you? That's the sad thing.
Yeah.
Well, because then you wonder what happened to that person.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. I have a very good friend who's a medium that I've been working with for 20 years. And she tells the story about she realized she had this gift, Roxie, from age 5 or 6 on. And yet she had an awful time, even within her family structure, getting anybody to even recognize it, or never mind discuss it. It was always just, don't mention it, don't tell anybody. And it kind of back in those days followed what we did to people in general. We said to men, you can't be nurses. We said to women, you can't be police officers. And we constantly did that to our children. We conditioned them at a young age to believe what they could or couldn't be, without opening up the universe to them, to saying, you can be anything you want. And today, I see that I have 2 young grandchildren, and they just have no boundaries. I mean, they just talk about being everything, because no one's told them they can't anymore. And I think that's one of the greatest changes that I've seen over my lifetime, frankly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Bob. There was a time, people often ask me, what's your favorite, your favorite time frame? Because, I spend so much time talking about history. And I love the 17th century. I would not have survived the 17th century. I do love the 19th century because you had the spiritualist movement. So, you could talk to spirits on a Saturday night, and go to church on Sunday, without any problem. Like, people had, no issues with divination or talking to spirits. But I truly think at some point after that, after World War I, I think it sort of all was swept under the rug, or, tucked into the trunk in the attic, and nobody wanted to talk about it, because I hear from so many people that it's skipped a generation, people with their intuitive practice, or people talking about spirits, that was something that their grandmother did, or something that their aunt did, and that they feel such a connection to it now, so they're able to explore that, where, again, there was that generation in between where you didn't even talk about it. It was, like, embarrassing. It was against religious beliefs, but it is coming around, and people are more curious than ever, and sharing more than ever.
But I also think, we had the great religious revolution where the gravestones changed, with the willow, the urn, the celebration of life. On Friday nights or Saturday nights, like you said, they're going to go talk to the dead at the cemetery, their family members. And then on Sunday, they go to church and pray. Then we hit, like you said, World War I, World War II. Dynamics changed. That's when the dynamics starting to change. So what you had happening was, by then we became an industrial country. Industrialization in Lawrence, Portsmouth and beyond were growing. The one religion grabbed its power, and, you can see that because even like Lawrence, a new city on the Merrimack, or whatever you want to call it at the time, you go around the common where it was the center of everything. It was all the old churches, the Presbyterian Church, the Pilgrim Church, the Methodist Church. The Catholic churches came later, but you won't see them around the center of the city at all. They're in the neighborhoods. They're in the outskirts. And I think religious beliefs started changing, and that's when families went, enough is enough. We're going to bury this. You didn't see your uncle. He died fighting for this country. He didn't come visit you at night. You're seeing things. And that's what I think changed a lot of this.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the paranormal.
I'm glad things are, starting to change where people, don't feel frightened to share or to even just explore. Some people just want to explore before they even share,
right.
And to learn a little bit more about it. So again, that's why conversations like this are great.
No, it is. And we need to keep an eye and we need to keep moving in this direction. We don't need to go backwards. We need to keep moving forward.
Well, I think back to Roxie's point, which was very valid a few minutes ago. You have, in my day, frankly, we didn't even have the internet. Okay? I mean, most people today under the age of 50 would laugh at that, but that's true. If you look at the avenues you have today to communicate, and this podcast is one of them. Roxie, what you do every day is another venue to get stories out there and get people talking about it. So when people come to your tours or your lectures, they have to walk away feeling better about the experiences they must have had.
That has been the mission pretty much for New England Curiosities since its inception in 2001. Is, you're going to walk away, whether it's, like you said, whether it's a tour or a talk or, having read the book, one of the books, that you feel better and more connected and more inspired. And that's like, when I wrap up every tour that I do, that is what I tell them, is to go and explore and ask questions and have this comfort level. If I didn't have that mission, I couldn't do what I do. You have to have that sense about things and that sense about people. And the funny thing is,
right.
I can, have somebody again, at an event or what have you, and they'll be like, oh great, had a good time, see you later. And then 6 months down the line, you get an email or a phone call from them. And they're like, I just want to let you know, this experience helped me, in this particular way. So you never, ever know, how much further down the line, what you're talking to somebody about today or what you're talking about on the podcast that you may never even know is affected
right.
by your presentation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that more people walk away with a better feeling about themselves and about their experiences. And I think in lots of times they walk away and say to themselves, you know what, all these years that people criticized me and didn't believe me, I now know I was right. I have a client that I deal with. I can't say too much about it, but her biggest problem, Roxie, is that nobody believes her. That's her biggest issue. That she has all of these experiences, that she wants people to listen, but she realizes that within her family structure and friend circle, they don't believe her. And she knows that, and that's sad. That's really sad because that bothers her more than the experiences do, frankly.
It's sad, and it can be really frustrating for, the person or the people involved too. And if you think about it, and on the other side of it, literally on the other side of it, from a spiritual sense, this could be, and, again, not knowing all of, the details, but this could be a spirit that is reaching out to comfort someone. This is a spirit that might need assistance. Like, there's that whole other part of the story that's not being served as well as what this person is going through. So, I think
right.
sometimes you don't even realize that there's so much more to someone's experience. And when you dismiss it, you're dismissing them as well and not validating their feelings and their experience, which can be really damaging for people.
Oh, absolutely. I think the other side of that is the other side of it, right? And that is that spirits, we know, use up energy to communicate with us. And if we're constantly ignoring them, how many over the last 100 years have not communicated? Have said, well, nobody's listening, nobody's getting, paying attention, so they move on. it has to be large numbers of spirits.
I agree, and that it's such an excellent point, because you see it that, at that point, and sometimes people don't come to it until they're older, or they block it out. I don't know how people block it out, because I definitely couldn't. The things that have happened over the years, there's no way I could block it. But some people do, and then they reconcile with it in later years, and either realize that it was something that was really important, that was meant to be heard by them, or someone was trying to connect with them from the other side for a particular reason. Like there was there was more to it. And when people finally come to that, it's amazing, because you can see that there was sometimes a sense of loss, like how come I didn't believe that, or how come I dismissed it, or how come I ignored it, when it starts to make so much more sense, because maybe someone in the family's passed away and they can talk about it now.
Right. No, I'm experiencing that myself, frankly. I just lost my wife in September. And there's been, at least since September, 4 or 5 episodes that we've had here, and with my children, by the way, that there is no doubt in my mind that my wife is reaching out. Now, that could very well be because of what I've done over 20 years. So she knows I'm receptive to that. But it is amazing, because it does help you get over the grief, because it says it's not over. There's still something to come. There has to be, because she's reaching out. And I think a lot of people would experience that if they open themselves up to it.
I do too, and I would even go so far as to say, like, if even the most skeptical person, or the person that doesn't even want to talk about it at all, if you can just think about it in the sense that that relationship, that love, that energy that is there, that keeps you connected, that energy also doesn't die. It doesn't go anywhere. It's still there. Like how incredible is that to, reaffirm the bond that you had with this person, or those experiences that you had with that person as well. It's so funny, because I'm thinking of a story. I was doing a reading for someone a few months ago, and while I was giving them the reading, it was quite interesting. There was a gentleman who had sat down. Again, I could see them, they couldn't, and it was really strange. So so I think your uncle just came in the room, and the person hadn't talked about an uncle or anything like that. And she said her uncle was the only one, while he was alive, that would talk to her about spirits. And everything that we ended up describing was the uncle sitting there. So isn't that strange? Again, if that person knows and they pass, of course, in that sense, I could see them connecting. I've been with my husband for 25 years, and we've already told each other, like, whoever goes first, like, we're coming back to let them know.
Right. Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's great. I love that. That's wonderful.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Of all the tours, I've been on many of your tours, and I just find them fascinating. And every time I go on a tour of yours, I learn something different about that area down there. If you had to pick one tour that you say, this is my favorite, which one would it be?
Oh God, you're doing it to me again.
I am, yeah.
It's because they're all so different. I mean, I guess from things you didn't know you needed to know about Portsmouth standpoint. I really do like the waterfront tour. I love the downtown tour that I do, which is kind of like the classic, all the places people go in town that are haunted. But the waterfront tour remains my favorite because it has that Portsmouth element where they've changed the street name, they tore down the buildings that were there. It was the old red light district, and it looked so different. Like, it doesn't even look like the same city 100 years ago. To be able to tell the stories of the people that were coming to town, on the ships that nobody kept track of, what was going on in the river, to be able to show people, to stand, on the street and look at this corner, and then to show them a picture of it 100 years ago and tell them, here's the ghost stories, here's the murders, here's all of those layers that Portsmouth has tried to erase because they aren't too keen on that time frame in their history. But it's an old port town, and I love to see people's reaction when they're like, really, I'm standing there? This happened here? Like, for me as a researcher and a lover of history and architecture, to be able to bring people back in time like that, there is no greater thrill.
Yeah, you nailed that, because that's my favorite tour too. And I've been on it a bunch of times, and it is just one of the best tours. If you really want to listen to the history of the waterfront in Portsmouth, it's just you do such a great job at that. Tom, have you been on that tour?
No, I have not.
Okay, so maybe we talk later on as we'll do a live podcast from one of those waterfront tours.
We could do that.
Huh?
That would be fun. And what's kind of cool about it is too, for the small amount of people that come on the tour that aren't into the ghost stuff and they're doing it because, somebody else wants to come on the tour, or, they're up here on vacation, like, they walk away with like a whole new view.
Right.
And it's not a bad view. It's not a bad view at all. This Portsmouth is an amazing city with so many layers of history. But it's like, wow, this is like, this is just as cool as Strawberry Bank's existence. It's like, it's that richness of the character of the city, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Well,
the other thing, too, you'll probably notice a pickup on this, Roxie, because we've picked this up in Haverhill. And it's not really paranormal, but the architectural tours, you said, I know you're an architectural historian. Because of Chronicle, they're starting to come back. Just the straight out architectural stuff. So, I mean, that's
the downtown tour. Yeah.
That's the downtown. But just so you know,
that's
they
an
are
excellent
coming back.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Now, Roxie, you've also written, I don't know how.
Architecture is, I go and I take ghost tours when I'm out and about as well, because I always like to sort of see what everybody is doing. And I always come back to Portsmouth and I'm like, how lucky am I to be talking about these old buildings and still have them standing there, to stand in front of a gravestone from 1682 and to be able to tell that story is just absolutely incredible. And to share that with people that have never even seen a gravestone pre-1800. I mean,
right.
Our graveyards in New England are some of the best, I think, in the country. That's
that they are.
I can't help it, but I believe it.
No, I'm behind you 120% on the graveyards of New England. That's for sure.
Yeah. Roxie, I don't know how you find time to do it, but you've also written quite a few books, correct?
Yeah, my 10th book just came out 2 days ago.
Oh, what's the name of that book?
My 10th book, oddly enough, we were kind of dipping into it, is it's the history and lore of New England sea glass. So it talks a lot about shipwrecks and things that you discover on the beach, great New England storms, the hurricane and the blizzards, of old, and how they've reshaped our coastal areas, and how you can still find remnants of the past washing ashore. So it's sort of a tour de force of New England, of things that I found on the beaches and been able to trace them back to not only shipwrecks, but ghost stories and artifacts from our history.
I find a lot of great stuff in a couple locations around North Beach. I'm always finding old plates and stuff like that, especially on the rocky edge. I'm up there all the time picking.
Oh, that's awesome. It's so relaxing, and you never know what you're going to find.
No, you don't. And actually, I didn't know that was your book, but I was at the drugstore today, CVS, and I saw the book on the rack, but I was waiting in line and had to get out, but I'll go back and pick it up. Now I know that's your book.
Yeah, that's the newest one, and then previous to that, in this past October, because I just wrote 2 books in 1 year, I'm going to take a break now for a little while, for at least the next 6 months. But my book previous to that was on cemeteries of Vermont, so it's the Vermont Book of the Dead, and it's a look at the entire state of Vermont's historic and weird and heartbreaking cemeteries.
Yes.
So, Roxie, where can people find your books? Where do they market them out from?
My books are everywhere. I'm so lucky that my publisher, the History Press, has a great distribution. Always if you can support your local independent bookstore, that's a good place to look. But you can also get them at Barnes and Noble. You can order them off of my website at newenglandcuriosities.com as well. But they're pretty far and wide. My very first book was Haunted Portsmouth back in 2007, and if you love Portsmouth, you're gonna love that book. I could probably rewrite it 20 more times now and add a lot more, but they're everywhere. You can get them all, even at CVS apparently.
Yes.
Yeah, I was surprised, Tom, that it was in CVS.
No, her publishing company has a huge area. I've seen them at Walgreens, CVS.
Wow.
I've even seen one of her books because I have to go to Hannaford's because that's the only place locally I can get the Backwoods magazine that does a story of Bigfoot almost monthly.
Yeah. And
you'll see around August, September, Roxie's book showing up over there too.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna go out tomorrow and buy that.
Yeah, I got to go back to this CVS tomorrow to pick up what I put in today. So I will probably be picking that up tomorrow too.
Now, Roxie, if people go to your website, do you have your books on your website?
Yep, there's on the main page. There's a link to the Curiosities store, and you can find all of my books on there. I've got glow in the dark T-shirts and all sorts of fun stuff. So if you just click over to the store, you'll see all my books on there.
And do you still have the physical store in Portsmouth?
I have a studio in Portsmouth that's over by Jumpin' Jay's, so I do a lot of workshops and I do my readings over there. So that's my my official address, which is the Divinity Lounge, which is over on Middle Street. But I'm everywhere and anywhere the ghost stories will take me.
Well, no, that's good.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, and the stories that come out of it are just amazing to me. I happen to be an uneducated historian, I call myself, and yet I just think that history between the 1600s and the 1800s was just so interesting because of the lifestyle that those folks had to persevere through. The Smutty Nose Murders, I've done a lot of presentations on that. And when you think about their life and what they went through and how they tried to make money and where they lived, it was just an amazing time for people.
It was. Also, too, when you talk about the 1600s, you're talking about the bloodiest time in American history, too, which was the early Native American wars. And So Judge Saltonstall and Lieutenant Saltonstall actually called that the bloodiest time in American history. And all along our coast, we had to deal with it. Right, Roxie?
Well, I mean, the world moved by water until the rail in the 19th century. So, our coast was where it was at, and it was a prosperous and dangerous time to be alive, depending on where you were on the New England coast. And, some communities were a little more loyal than others. I mean, Portsmouth, for all it is, there were a lot of people in Portsmouth back in the 17th century, as time went on, and their descendants were very loyal when the revolution hit. It was been an interesting time to be alive and to see, what it was like. I don't know, no medicine, ships bringing in disease from all around the world. It was rough. I don't know, if people would be able to survive today.
Right.
It's a time we almost can't even conceive of. We've got the stories, but can you really imagine being alive then?
I always love looking at the old medicine bottles, okay? I see them all over the place. And sometimes there's still a little tag on it that was original, and it would say 89% alcohol and 1 or 2% ether. That's just going to kill everything.
Geez. Wow.
You've seen those, right, Roxie?
Oh, I absolutely have. There's actually a gentleman, his name is Dick Scott, and he owns Portsmouth Scuba, and I had interviewed him for things that he found in the Piscataqua River and around the rocks over by Neville Lighthouse. And he had quite a collection of embossed bottles with very questionable ingredients on them that he had collected from underneath the waves of the Atlantic, just off our coast here. And I'm like, wow, no wonder people died so back in the day. It wasn't just the illness, it was the medicine that they were taking that killed them too.
Yeah. Some of that stuff is real interesting at best.
It is. Fascinating stuff.
At best.
Roxie, tell us quickly here some of the events that you have coming up and how people can get information on them.
Sure. So a week from Saturday is the downtown historic Portsmouth Legends and Ghost Walk. I've been doing that tour for 22 years. You can go onto my website again on Curiosities to sign up for that. I am starting to roll out the October schedule. We're already booking the October tours, but if you go to my Facebook page, Knowing Curiosities, you're going to see that there are a lot of events that you can attend free that are sponsored by libraries and historical societies that I go all over. I just did a tour of the North Cemetery in Concord, New Hampshire, which is free to attend for people. They had a waiting list a mile long, so we were talking about doing another one over there. So there's a couple different places on the Facebook page, and then the Knowing Curiosities page. And it's a great way to spend an hour.
And do you recommend that people sign up for them?
More than you ever wanted to know.
Do you recommend that people sign up for them in advance?
If you're thinking about coming out in October, usually by August, all of my October dates are sold out. So we are already starting to see people booking for what I just have on there now for October. So you definitely, if you don't want to be disappointed, because there's only one of me that does these tours, you want to book early for sure.
Yeah, and we tell our listeners all the time that you need to be going on these websites, checking them for different events all the time, because they do book up quickly.
Yes.
They do it, but see now, doesn't that bring us full circle? Like, doesn't that just tell you that people are interested, they're curious, they've got stories? So, those are the people that we're seeing on the tours too. So, it's really kind of cool to be able to connect that way as well.
That it is.
Oh yeah, it's interesting to me too, because you meet such great people on these tours that maybe you're just visiting Portsmouth,
right?
For tourism and stuff. So
yes.
It's a lot of fun.
No, it is.
Tom, final comment.
Yeah. You have somebody at the end of the tour, and they're like, hey, can I tell you my story? And that's like a bonus for me. So I get a story from somebody that came on the tour. So it's always a blast.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, Roxie, I want to thank you for joining us. This is a great episode. Everybody learned a lot today. Bob and I got an event coming up. When is that, Bob? July
19th.
Yep.
It's at the Sandown Meeting House, Roxie, and it's kind of a different type of event. We're going to invite a group from different disciplines. For example, one paranormal group, We're hoping the witches might attend, a medium, a psychic, UFO, Bigfoot, and so on. Then we're going to have a roundtable discussion that will have experts from each discipline sit at a table and take questions from the audience, so that you can ask any question you want, and we'll throw it out to the table. What we're hoping to do there, Roxie, is to get different points of views, maybe from a psychic, a medium, a paranormal investigator, or a witch, whatever, what their point of view on that question is. And then we're going to finish the night up with an investigation. So we would love to have you come. We'll give you a booth if you'd like to bring some of your literature and material. The first hour of the event is nothing more than these groups marketing themselves for availability for people.
I appreciate the invitation. I will check my calendar and see, and if I have the date, I absolutely love to be there. I know in July I'm going to New York and Mystic with my ghost stories, Mystic, Connecticut. But that sounds like an awesome idea for an event. I love what you're doing there. Yeah,
it's going to be a fun event. So.
Yeah, you'll also be interested in the historical value of the Sandown Meeting House, because it's one of the few remaining meeting houses in New England that's all original. It has virtually not changed from 1754. There's no electricity, there's no nothing. It's the original house. So, a matter of fact, you mentioned Goody Cole. This is where they filmed the trial of Goody Cole for a movie that they made about her.
No kidding.
Yes.
Oh, this place sounds like a treasure.
And pretty cool.
Also, for the historian in both of us,
right.
It still has the original outhouse. Now, what I mean by an outhouse, it's got about 8 or 9 stalls with doors connecting them.
That's awesome.
I've never had seen that before going there, and it's real interesting. And
Roxie, if you can't make it on the 19th, Tom and I will make sure that you get a personal tour of that whenever it's convenient for you.
Yes.
That sounds awesome. Oh my God, I love it. I love old New England.
Yes, old New England is great. And then
there you go.
One last thing, Bob, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
This Saturday night, we'll be back at Haunted Hilldale Cemetery giving the Hilldale Cemetery Ghost Walk. So that's this Saturday night, 10 o'clock.
That's also a great take.
Yeah. So come on
now,
down.
Tom, where can people find out information on that?
They can just call me at 978-376-2807, and it's on Facebook. On
great.
A bunch of different pages. And I'll be sharing it again. And Roxie, this was great. We're going to have you back on because you got a lot more stories to tell.
I do. A lifetime.
A lifetime. That's great. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Stay spooky, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes, we'll stay spooky.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. This was a great show. Huh, Bob? It was a great show.
Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah. Yeah, Roxie's quite the character. She, like I said in the beginning of the show, she is an icon in New England and maybe outside of New England, for all I know. But certainly in New England, she's an icon.
That she is. So we're coming to an end of another great show. We want to thank everybody for tuning in all across the universe. And we'll see you in another week or so. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening. Good night.